listeners. So I'm just going to freestyle right now and just talk about Overlooked, talk about TunukaMedia, and just kind of introduce the concept to you and why I thought that Overlooked was a very important podcast to put together. My name is Yemi. I'm the host of the Overlooked podcast. For some background, Tunuka is a Yoruba word. Yoruba is spoken in the western part of Nigeria, and it's a Yoruba word that can be loosely translated to kind of mean tender or open-hearted. So when I was naming the studio itself TunukaMedia, I thought I wanted something that would be able to warmly and openly welcome people. Overlooked is the first podcast we're putting together. Actually, it's the second. We started with Africa in My Kitchen, where I talk about food with a close friend of mine, Ijoma. And so Africa in My Kitchen itself is a different project. But right now, just to talk about Overlooked, and you should check out Africa in My Kitchen. But Overlooked is something I thought was really, really important. One thing I've always found out is that the news tends to focus on what's hot for the day, right? So it's always what's hot and bothered, what can get the most clicks, what can get the most likes, and it tends to be focused on what is the hot news breaking item of the day. So if there are little local stories, or there are little feel-good things, or there are little even not so good things that are happening in other parts of the world, people don't know about it. So for example, at work, I was talking to a friend of mine about the things that are going on in Cameroon, where a lot of people are getting killed and things like that. And she had absolutely no idea that this has been going on for a couple of years now. So I think about since 2017. And it blew my mind away. But you can't blame people for that, right? You can't blame people, because sometimes when all you see in the news is what's happening in the US with the elections and the political process, in Canada it's one thing or the other, and so you don't always get to hear what's happening in like Mozambique, or what's happening somewhere in Djibouti, or like different countries around the world. I speak more of Africa because I am African, so it comes closer to mind and to heart. What the Overlooked podcast does is that I actually try to really dig in and find stories from corners of the world that the popular media doesn't really report. They're not less important, but they do not necessarily grab headlines enough, right? They may be on the website, they may be somewhere, you'd have to click a little bit, but they may be buried somewhere in like international news or something like that. But you wouldn't be able to find them in like the top headlines. I mean, you could probably find things about, your celebrities, but people getting kidnapped, people getting killed, medical breakthroughs in different parts of the world, scientific breakthroughs and things like that. And those things are not always covered. My goal is to inspire and for people to go ahead and then dig in a little bit more. This medium is to get you thinking. The world is bigger than where you're at. The world is a global village. We should know what's happening to our neighbor, not just what's happening with us. And so my goal with Overlooked Podcast is to, as much as possible, try to enhance and expand our worldview beyond our country, our city, our county, and expose us to what people are experiencing around the world. It's always been a passion of mine, particularly as I'm African. I don't want to ramble, but what I do want to say is that, especially when you're living in the Western Hemisphere, and the only view you get about different countries is the bad things. Good things are happening. Bad things are happening too, but good things are also happening. When I look at the news and the only thing I see about African continent is hungry and starving kids who one child there has a fly on his nose. Not to say these things aren't happening, but it's the only thing you see. The only time certain countries are mentioned is if there's some kind of terrorist attack or things like that. These places have other things going on. There's good stories, there's bad stories too, but there are also good stories. There's so many things happening in the world that it can't be all bad. And though I know I'm beginning to ramble, I just wanted to kind of step back and give people an introduction to why I'm really passionate about this project and why I think it's something that we need in this time where the world is so big but feels so small and insulated. This is why at the end of every episode I ask if there's something that is happening where you're at and you think everyone else needs to hear it, tag. If I don't mention it in the main story, I'll mention it in an honorable mention. It's not just a outro just for the sake of an outro, but it's a way to just engage and say, I may not get to everything, I may not be able to find everything myself, but together we can educate the world and show the world what's happening at any point in time. And we can come together as one global village to be able to help each other learn more about different cultures, learn the good, the bad, the ugly, the funny, the ridiculous, the uplifting, the everything. I'm hoping that this intro has served to enlighten you about what the Overlooked podcast is going to be doing. And yeah, thank you so much for listening, and I look forward to sharing stories I find with you every week from this point on. If it's blah 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 blah, reach out on Twitter or Facebook. Just search for TunukaMedia. Thanks for listening. As a blah 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 blah.